and the guy that drove was a guy that was supposedly doing a dirt bike circuits. So it looked like a guy and his chick and two dirt bikes in the back, but it was a double. So he was receiving most of his cocaine from him. At the same time, Griselda was in there also.
Griselda Blanco
in Miami. I never saw her as being as huge as they say they were. I know for a fact that every time we were at the Omni or Dadeland, sometimes, you hang out all day, basically from payphone to payphone, making phone calls, and you go to a mall, and you see the other people, like Griselda's people. Whenever Griselda's people saw police people, they want no part of it.
They were afraid.
Yeah, everybody, all Colombians were really afraid of Poli. He was the real thing. There was no black and white. There was no gray area there. He was it.
But you become essentially this guy's like chauffeur. And this is after you break up with that girl.
Right.
You had gotten into the coke business with her, but then when you and her broke up, she's like, okay, we'll stick with some of my people because then, you'll actually be doing legit shit. But like, is this when you're developing into the logistics expert, or did you not have even a role like that yet?
No, at that point, she kept working with Poli, although we were broken up. So Poli kept supplying her merchandise, and her client was an American guy in San Francisco who was a top-notch client. A client like that you don't have. Back then, a guy that you send 100 kilos. Back then in Miami, you were selling 5 kilos of cocaine, and, half of it got ripped off. The other half came in 5s and 10s and 20s. And, it was just a disaster, not a clean business. You ended up being, they were sending 100 and 200 kilos a month back in 78 and selling at $65,000 a pop. And this guy up there, his past was hash smuggling. They had a lot of money from hash smuggling. They were very organized, very logistic minded. They weren't just coke pushers. They were importers of hash from Lebanon, Afghanistan. So they had a lot of money, and they had a great clientele. And they would pay you in suitcases full of hundreds, rarely even 50s, organized, never a penny missing. So they had the best client. They had the goose that laid the golden eggs. Back then, 200 kilos, $13 million, $12 million every month.
And did you see, you're getting exposed to how they would get it to them, though, right?
Yes.
So how would they do that?
Back then, it was a pain in the ass because you'd have to bring the money back to Miami. Eventually, they set up a banking system where you would give the money over in L.A. Okay, the banking system, I mean, just some guy that picks up the money in L.A. and then he takes care of it, because it was already a pain in the ass to get the coke from Miami to L.A. or San Francisco. Even bigger pain in the ass was bringing back the money.
Okay, let's stay with the money for a second. So a guy would go pick it up, and and they'd have to get it back to Miami to wash it there. But then eventually they were able to wash it in L.A.
Well, what they did, how they washed it, how they got it back to Colombia was their thing. But we said, we don't want to deal with the money part of it anymore. So to accommodate us, they put some people in L.A. to take the money from us.
Got it. Okay.
To accommodate us.
So how would you get the coke from? Well, I guess there's 2 trips there: coke from Colombia to Miami, and then Miami to L.A.
Back then, we were getting it from Pepe Sarmiento. Later on, a few years down the road, I started working with the Ochoa cousins and the Piedrahitas.
But how would you get it there?
We built trucks with stashes, and the truck was a pickup style truck, and we would put a couple of the dirt bikes, and the guy that drove was a guy that was supposedly doing dirt bike circuits, you know. So it looked like a guy and his chick and two dirt bikes in the back, but it was a double false bottom, and it would hold up to 300 kilos in the bottom of the pickup.
Could dogs smell that though, like cop dogs?
We always wrapped it in a certain way and vacuum packed it and put coffee or Vaseline or things. So that truck finally did get busted. It did get busted. It only had 40 kilos at the time. It was somewhere in St. Louis. I don't know where. But it was a showpiece also.
A showpiece?
The police used it as a showpiece to show other policemen how how their shit was being stashed.
Got it.
Yeah, it was quite ingenious. It was a nice thing.
And you obviously had a network of like drivers who would be responsible. Like you're not the one driving it, obviously.
No, I had drivers. They always fit a certain profile, and then I had one driver that was like the main driver, and he was a good friend of mine, and he did very well.
What kind of profile? You say fit a certain profile.
A nerd.
You wanted nerds driving your trucks with coke across the country.
This guy, if you looked at this guy, the last thing you would think about would be cocaine. This guy was like...
How do you find... You go to a local college and say, oh, you look good.
No, he was just a friend of mine. And I said, you fit the perfect profile. He was so... He didn't want to deal... You know, he was like paranoid to the point that it was intelligent for him to be paranoid and act goofy and not want to, you know, party at all times. He was a perfect guy. And he never got busted.
And you take care of those people pretty good. Now, how does the money work for you? Can we do a little math here? So let's say you had a load of 300 kilos. I think that was one basic one you were talking about a couple minutes ago. And you get that from the Ochoa brothers. When the distributor buys it in LA, how much money at that time, maybe late 70s, early 80s, would they pay for that 300 kilos?
Okay. Back when I was distributing, we would usually send 100 kilos at a time.
Okay. Let's go with 100 then.
We would buy it in Miami. I would get it at 52, 50, 52, and I would sell it at 62, 60, almost $10,000 a kilo.
Okay.
It was a very good business.
Okay. So you're making $10,000 profit a kilo. So the way I'm understanding this is once the Ochoas send it to you in Miami, you have now bought it from them. It is now yours.
It was fronted.
What do you mean it was fronted?
It was given to me on credit. I had very good credit because they knew.
Oh, they have credit in the drug business. It's good to know.
I never paid for. That's the other thing. I never went into a sleazy apartment and show me the money or show me the kilos. I never. They used to send me the merchandise. I used to take 100 kilos. I used to ship it to L.A. or San Francisco, and I'd pay them when I got paid.
So you would then ship it.
I would split the profit with Poli's brother because he was in on it with me.
Oh, the killer had a brother?
Yeah, Enrique. But I was receiving from various people at that time. I was receiving from the Piedrahitas. I was receiving from the Ochoa cousins. I was receiving from another group, Darío. And, I would receive 80 from these guys, 80 from these guys, 70, and end up, later on, my distribution network grew.
Sure.
I had 11 guys all over, different between L.A., San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Minneapolis, Orlando, Miami, New York.
That was the coke Alessi was doing in Santa Cruz a couple years ago. You're
Santa Cruz. I had a
right?
big, great client in Santa Cruz. In Santa Cruz, I remember one day, we had some coke in Miami. We didn't know what to do with it. Shit, we got to get it out west. It was like this, sometime late November. And so I said, fuck, let's just buy So we bought this 1981. It was 1981. The Mercedes came out with a turbo diesel. I said, perfect. That's a low-key car, turbo diesel. We just put the shit in the trunk. It was like 80, 100 kilos in the trunk. I don't know how the trunk was full of that shit. Henry drove the turbo diesel out to San Francisco. Perfect. We deliver it. And suddenly it was like December 21st and says, okay, we got your money. You need to come pick it up. Boom. $6.5 million. Put it in the trunk of the turbo diesel, and I drove it back with somebody. I had to drive it back because I wasn't going to spend Christmas in San Francisco, and I wasn't just going to, sit in a hotel room with $6.5 million. And I remember this guy was a Cuban guy. He was like half black, half white, mulatto type guy with curly hair. But I was driving out of San Francisco, and somewhere past Reno, I don't know, I almost missed the curve. The thing is, the car almost just flew off the mountain. This guy turned white. I mean, white, paper white. He says, "I'm going to drive from now on." Because Jefferson Starship had just come out with a new, Fly the Dragon or Flew the Dragon, this song. And I was trying to switch it back then. You put a CD in the car and it would skip. If you took a bump, it would skip. But I was CDing and driving in the mountain and the curve, and I missed the curve. This motherfucker turned white. I mean, white out white. And then we took the route through via St. Louis and then made it back to Miami.
Okay, so back to some of my original question, though, here, because I want to make sure I understand this. The way I'm getting it is that your client in San Francisco, for example, is completely divorced from the Ochoas. The Ochoas don't even know who they are.
Oh, they know who he was.
They do know who.
They knew.
Did they ever deal with them directly?
No. He was very respectful of that. I never really hooked him up. Poli dealt with him directly. And let me tell you a little something. Because Poli dealt with him, Poli allowed me and his brother to deal with him out of courtesy. You don't share people like that. Or, you keep you play those cards very tight.
Meaning he shared his client with you out of courtesy.
He shared his client with me out of courtesy, and he shared it with his brother, okay? Also courtesy to his brother, because, so his brother would make,
half.
Yeah, make money.
Right.
But, for example, the Ochoas or anybody else would never dare. They knew who the guy was. They had an idea of who he was.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.